cycle. You then review again within 24 hours of learning. You review within a week. You review after a month and after 6 months. And the staggering thing that happens to your recollections is that without a review cycle, in 24 hours, you will only remember 30% of what you've done today. With a review cycle, after 6 months, you can be as high as 80% recall. That is a tremendous difference. So it's well worth getting into this habit of a short review on a regular basis to keep you up to speed on what you're learning. And as I said, reviewing with a map is definitely a very easy way of doing it. Now, the other thing that makes your memories much more memorable, much more easy to recall, is using the multisensory learning that we talked about. If you can make your memories both visual and physical memories and also auditory, so that when you're recalling something, you have all these different inputs there, that will make them stronger. If you link them to things like humour, humour is very, very memorable. So make your memories funny, make them interact with each other, put movement into your memories. That will all help recall.
One of my favourite ways of learning anything is to come up with an acronym. Here you see an acronym for the word negotiate, and we're going to be teaching you a way of learning the key points of negotiating skills. We use acronyms all the time. When you're at school, you probably learned the Great Lakes, Holmes, Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, Superior. The government just loves acronyms. You know, you've got NASA, and you've got the FBI, and the CIA, and HUD, and you can remember the names of those agencies. So for those of you involved in sales or negotiating, or in fact for anybody, because we're all negotiating every day of our lives in different situations, we came up with the word negotiate and we turned it into an acronym so that every individual letter stands for a key word, a key technique when negotiating. The N stands for navigate, because one of the first things you should do is take charge of the negotiation. You're navigating your way through it, you're steering it. Then E is for eyes and ears. You need to keep your eyes open for any giveaway body language signals, and you need to keep your ears alert for the hidden meanings in conversation, the things that people say and also the things that they don't say. The G in negotiate is for grimace, and this is one of the most basic tactics of all, which is that whenever anybody makes you an offer, the first thing you do is flinch. You pull a face. You don't like it. You grimace. The O is outrageous. Similar to the one before, anytime anybody makes you an offer, it's outrageous. You couldn't possibly accept that. But you yourself know that you, in turn, will also be making outrageous demands. The T is for trade-off. And this is something that you should do immediately, always, when somebody asks you for a concession, you ask for something in return. It's a trade-off. I is for impersonate. In any negotiating situation, you're going to be pretending that you're either a reluctant buyer, maybe, or you're a reluctant seller, or you're raising issues that aren't really of any great concern to you. It's a decoy, it's a red herring, but you're raising those to get them settled before you move on to the main issue. Or you might be pretending to be dumb, when in fact you know that you're really smart. So that's I for impersonate. The A is for agree. And most salespeople know this, that you should always agree up front with the customer. Yes, I understand what you're saying. I see your point entirely. But, or you can use the good old feel, felt, found technique. And know how you feel, other people have felt the same way, but what they found eventually was. The T in negotiate is for teasing. This is really nibbling and getting extra concessions. You've already agreed that you're getting a $50,000 a year salary. You've agreed the health benefits package. You've agreed how many weeks vacation you're going to have. You've shaken hands, and just as you're turning away to walk out the door, you turn back and you say, oh yes, and that does include membership in the country club, doesn't it? So you're just teasing for an extra concession, probably at the last minute. And the last one in negotiate is E for easy acceptance. Because after you've got everything that you want in the negotiation, you want it to be a win-win. You want the other person to be happy. So you want to make it easy for them to accept the deal. So you can make them a promise such as, well, the next time I'm in town, I will come to you first, and I make sure that you get our most favored rates. So the way I learned the key skills for negotiating was to actually put them into this kind of acronym. And these are the key points that my good friend Roger Dawson came up with in his negotiating programs.
Malcolm is very gifted with the linguistic talent, and obviously for him to create an acronym is something that's natural and easy. For people who maybe aren't quite so good with words, what they would probably do is use their mathematical talent and just literally number the points as they came across them, and then they would be able to say, there are 9 key areas that I have to remember. And obviously, as you work through them, if you can only get to 8, you know you're missing one. The same sort of principle, but using more of a mathematical approach than the linguistic one. Another way of actually committing what you're learning to memory and helping you revise things is to create flashcards. And again, we've used the Negotiate acronym. And basically, if you're stuck in a traffic jam and you've got them with you, you can pick them up. And what does the N stand for? And on the back, we've got the key points. Steer the negotiation in the right direction, lay down the initial criteria. And you can go through them so that you can gradually learn and test yourself on the different stages. So there's another technique that's very, very useful. Basically, to round up this section on memory, one of the key things is to understand that when we're asleep and our eyes are offline, the brain carries on working and sifts through the information that we've been taking in all day long. So actually sleeping on it is a very important memory technique. And we've all experienced, you go to bed and you're trying to remember something and you really can't amongst everything else that's gone on. And next morning you wake up and you think, there it is, it just popped out. The brain has been working while you're asleep, filing all the bits of information in the right categories. And, with some of these memory techniques that we've introduced here and reminded you of, you certainly will find that overnight your memories will get put in the right places so that you can recall them when you need them.
Now let me add one excellent memory technique to the ones you've already seen, and it rejoices in the title of memory flashing. Essentially what you do is that you take your notes, your memory map if that's what you've done, you study it, and then you put it on one side, and you recreate that memory map or those notes from memory. Now, of course, when you then compare the original with the new set of notes, there's probably going to initially to be a difference. But if you do that process second time, third time even, until the new notes and the original are identical, then you really will have learnt that information cold. Now, I've taught that memory flashing technique to students, and many of them have told me that they get into an examination room and they absolutely can bring the whole information up visually into their memory. It's like copying it down from a blackboard. It's a very good learning strategy. I think of all the memory strategies that you've seen, the two with the biggest payoffs are memory flashing that I just showed you and the review cycle. And that review cycle is absolutely critical because research shows that the typical person normally forgets 70% of what they've learnt within 24 hours, and yet by using that quick review cycle, you can achieve an 80% recall after 6 months. Now that's a huge difference. Okay, you now understand the subject thoroughly and you remember it. What else? Test yourself. And we call this stage Show You Know.
We really need to practice what we're learning and make use of it in many different ways. We can do that by visualizing what we're learning, by putting ourselves in the picture and mentally rehearsing how we're going to use it in a situation. We could actually role play it with somebody else so that you each take a role and act out an imaginary situation. Make sure that you can use what you've learned to show you know. Tell your family about it and show you know.
It's very important to use it, to implement whatever you've learned in a classroom or a training room, and do it within 24 hours. Because by putting something into a real-life experience, you will be embedding it into your brain and you'll be able to use it forevermore. It's one thing to learn something in a classroom situation. It's an entirely different matter to take it and implement it in a workplace situation. So if you've been on that computer course, Make sure that when you get to work, you find a use for it. You build a database. You've got the computer programming all worked out. You've got to use it if you want to remember it. Check with others. What we're saying here is that learning shouldn't be a lonely experience. There are other people that are learning with you in most situations. Or if not, find somebody who will. And by interacting with that other person, you can literally double your learning power. Make sure that you keep reminding yourself of what you've learned. Make flashcards, make posters, make learning maps, have little post-it stickers, put them on the notice board, stick them on the refrigerator, put them in places where in the course of a day you will almost accidentally come upon those reminders of what you've learned, and those constant reminders will again help embed that information into your long-term memory. Work with your family. Your family hopefully is supportive of whatever it is that you're learning. So sit down with them, rehearse with them, get them to let you talk to them about what you've learned. Because when you have to tell somebody about what you've learned, you really have to marshal your thoughts. You really have to make sure that you understand it so you can communicate it to somebody else. Find yourself a mentor. Find yourself somebody who's more experienced than you are, who will be your guardian angel, if you like, somebody that you can go to who will give you support and encouragement and will have that extra piece of knowledge that you don't yet have. And finally, make a learning log. Keep a daily record of everything that you've learned, whether it's a new foreign word, whether it's a new English word, whether it's a computer code, whatever it might be. Just keep drawing up a list of everything that you've learned. Imagine how motivating it is when you've got your learning log of all your newly acquired wisdom. Very motivating.
We also have a technique that we call learning action circles. And really what we do is we like people who are learning to link up with other people, a group of study buddies we call them. Because when you join with other people and you share the learning, you learn from each other, you help the other person learn, you also introduce them to maybe a different way of learning because your techniques might not be their techniques. So everybody builds a common understanding then of different learning styles, and you can benefit from other people's learning styles.
Stage 6, and an important part of the learning process, is reviewing what you've learned, taking time out to sit back and reflect on what you've learned so that you can have that information to use forever.
This really is a self-analysis section. You use that intrapersonal intelligence to actually reflect and go through the process that you used, not the subject. So it's not so much the what we've learned, it's how did I learn? What techniques worked for me? What tools can I use again? Or what tools really didn't work? Let's, find some others. So you review and you find out what you can use that's going to benefit you. And there are two important questions that we ask at this stage. And the first is, what went well?
And the second is, what could have gone better? So to help us with this whole review process, what we've done is to put together what we call a personal progress plan. And this is something where you can sit down and ask yourself these key questions and make notes at your leisure. The most important things I learned are, you should prioritize the important things from any learning session. Secondly, as a result, I will do this or use these following ideas. So you haven't just learned something, you know how it's going to impact upon you in the real life situation.
The third one is, I can expect this initial difficulty, but I will overcome it by this action. This is actually addressing the fact that you realise that, it's not going to be plain sailing all the way through, and that there may be little stops and stumbles along the way, but you're prepared for them. The next one is, I will check on my progress. I will know when I've succeeded. So we go back to earlier today when we spoke about rewarding yourself. You don't have people around you like teachers and parents who reward children when they learn and achieve. You have got to install some sort of reward program and pat yourself on the back when you achieve it.
And that's actually the next key point, to identify how you are going to reward your success. Is it a pat on the back? Are you going to give yourself a gold star? Are you going to take yourself out for dinner to that French restaurant? You catch yourself doing it right. You also need to identify, I need to learn more about this. Yes, you've learned a lot and you've making major leaps forward, but there's bound to be more information on any subject that's your next learning point. And lastly, I will ask this person or these people to help. You find that mentor who can give you that helping hand, that person who can be your support and encouragement. Jane?
There are 3 keys to success, not just in learning, but success in life. The first is to start with the end in mind. Have a clear, strong vision of what you want to achieve, of where you want to be, because if you keep your eyes focused on that, you will find the route through it. The second one is to actually take responsibility for yourself. You cannot choose what happens to you, but you really can choose the way you react to it. So make sure that your reactions build for you the success that you want. And the third one is to learn from mistakes. We've said that. Don't ever be afraid of making mistakes, because the only person who doesn't make mistakes is the person who literally never does anything.
But it is important for us to all to acknowledge that we have something in common with the wealthiest and the most successful people in the world. 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week. It's what we do with that time that's so important, how we maximize that time. And accelerated learning principles will help you make the most of that time. We tell you things like you need to prioritize and know what's important rather than what's urgent. That may sound like a silly thing to say, but there are times when you could be working on a very important business project. The telephone is ringing, so it seems urgent. You answer the telephone, and who's there but somebody you don't want to talk to? Somebody trying to sell you something, somebody trying to collect a bill, or whatever. They're people you don't want to talk to. A waste of time. You need to prioritize and know how you're going to spend your time valuably. 2 other things I like to use called downtime and double time. Downtime really are those moments in the day that, again, we all have. The 15 minutes when we're waiting to catch a bus, the 15 minutes we're waiting to catch a train, or we're in the doctor's office or the dentist's office, and we're sitting there and we're idly flipping through magazines, or we're daydreaming. We could be spending that time instead very profitably. We've talked already, given you some examples about a foreign language. Imagine if you were carrying around with you flashcards with French words or Spanish words written on them. You can refer to them in that downtime. You would learn them, and you'd become quite effective in a foreign language over the course of a year, just spending 15 minutes of downtime a day. What I mean by double time is to really do 2 things at the same time. I'll give you a personal example. I started running about 3K 3 times a week. I found it quite boring, just plodding along there all by myself, until I got a Walkman. I invested in a Walkman. I invested in audio tapes from people such as Brian Tracy, Dennis Waitley, Roger Dawson. And so while I'm out there running, I'm not just being entertained, I'm gathering information. I'm improving my mind at the same time as I'm improving my body. Very important for us to make the most use of our time. And continuing on that theme, we'd really like to encourage you to push your personal comfort zone. Really try something new. You'll have discovered today your personal learning preferences, and you may be the kind of person who likes to sit down and quietly think through a problem and not be bothered by other people. But you might be amazed at the benefits you will accrue from sitting down with a group and trying to have an interpersonal learning experience. Some people don't like the thought of goal setting or visualizing success. I would encourage those people, the ones that are most reluctant to try something, to give it a try and to push your personal comfort level. We are living in a world of incredible accelerated change. The amount of information that we're asked to absorb on a daily basis is absolutely phenomenal, even compared to just a few years ago. And that's where accelerated learning is so important. Accelerated learning can help you learn anything easier, faster, better, more efficiently than ever before, if you will put it to use. We've given you some techniques today, we've given you some tactics, we've really shared some of the initial concepts of accelerated learning. But it's not going to do anybody any good at all unless you're willing to put it into practice. And we would encourage you to go away today and do that. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Okay, you've been through a really comprehensive learning experience now. You've got into a relaxed, motivated, focused state of mind. You've actually turned the information into visual or auditory or a physical form, or indeed, ideally, a combination of all three forms. You've explored the subject thoroughly through a combination of your intelligences. You've memorized some key words to trigger your recall at any time in the future, and you've tested yourself. What more could you possibly do? Well, just one more thing. Take just a moment to think through not what you learned, but how you learned it. This brief last stage of review enables you to become a better and better learner and in total control of the process of your own learning and indeed development. If I had to pick out some of the absolutely key steps, I think I'd probably say, 1, focus really hard on what learning this subject is going to do for you. Power read the material to get the core idea quickly. Then create a memory map of what you know so far. And then keep adding to that memory map as you progress. Stop and summarize the key points in your own words. Then teach what you've learned to somebody else. Memory flash the learning maps until you know it absolutely cold. And finally, use a review cycle so that you really lock it all down in your memory. However, these are just my ideas because they suit my learning style. The most important question is, what will you do to accelerate your learning?